Hello again, everyone. As promised, continuing my series on Catch 33, I'm doing a whole video about Mind's Mirrors, the breather between the second and third big chunks of the album. I'll kind of speed through the music part of this and use the rest of it to do something that I certainly don't do enough of, which is to pay attention to the lyrics. So after I talk about the guitar stuff, I'll look back on what's been happening in the lyrics on the album up until this point and talk about how they might relate to the music we've heard. We pick up where Entrapment left off, with those really low guitar attacks. Those are pretty close to the boundary of what we can hear as pitch, which is around 20 Hertz. I've talked about perceptual boundaries a fair amount as they relate to tempo on this channel. Here's a different type of one. A pitch is just an oscillation that's fast enough that we can't make out the individual back and forths, so to speak. So if you take any sound, like a kick drum attack, and start to string them together faster and faster, around the point where there are 20 of them every second, we stop hearing individual events and start hearing a steady pitch instead. And then if it keeps getting faster, the pitch gets higher. If this was news for you, welcome to the wonderful world of sound. And if this is something that you've known since before you were born, I apologize for restating things that you've known since before you were born. But anyway, this is the threshold where these down-tuned guitar attacks are, right near the point where we can hear the individual back and forth wobbling motion of the string. Then we get to the centerpiece of this track, this robot harmonized chorus.
The feeling frenzy on my startled soul, gnawing voraciously at the bones.
I'll get to some of the lyrics in a second, but for now, a few music theory facts and figures. We're still on a 4/4 grid. It's pretty much a B-flat mixolydian tonal world, and the vocal rhythms are non-repeating. So the 4/4 is typical, but the tonal kind of mixolydian sound and the non-repeating rhythms are, and of course the timbre, are not typical for Meshuggah's music. Then after the robot's chorus, there's a repetitive little thing that alternates between ascending major and minor seconds with the same upper note. In a branch of music theory called set theory, which is a way of thinking about harmony that doesn't involve traditional tonal syntax, there's a thing called an interval class, which includes all compound and inverted versions of an interval. So for example, the distance of a minor second, or one semitone, is called interval class 1, and so is the distance of a minor ninth, so that's an octave plus a minor second, and so is the distance of a major seventh, which is an octave minus minor second. Or you can think of it as a minor second down and then an octave up. Using this idea of interval class, we can group almost all of what's been going on harmonically in this album until this point under explorations of interval classes 1 and 2. Mostly these have been in compound forms, like in the various versions of the Autonomy Lost riff, which uses both a minor ninth and a major seventh at different points. Or in the paradoxical spiral riffs, which use minor and major ninths. So this long repetitive section is a new angle on these intervals, where instead of compound versions of them, we have the conjunct version. At first, these are like this. And then they're half as fast for a while. And we get a lower guitar counter melody near the end of that bit, and then it goes back to the original version for a little bit, still with that lower guitar counter melody underneath. play this part of the album live, they start with Mind's Mirrors, and there's a palpable anticipation in the crowd for the bangers to come. You can tell who doesn't know the album, though, by who starts moshing when this last section of Mind's Mirrors starts. Here we go back to distorted guitars and get this creepy, crawly, interlocked canon of major and minor seconds. Again, more interval class 1 and 2, and the last little bit of breathing room before the album really takes a turn for the chaotic. We have arrived at the second part of the video, where I'll take this breathing room to look at lyrics from the start of the album until now. If you're expecting a single authoritative interpretation of the meaning of Catch 33, you're going to be disappointed. Dealing with meaning in lyrics is almost never straightforward, and is even less so in the context of the fragmented, evocative ones that Jens and Tomas write. A more accurate way of talking about this, in probably most albums, is as a meaning-creating machine, one in which the webs of associations and cross-relations between words and sounds is rich and open-ended. That being said, there are a few strands I can draw together. A persistent theme in the lyrics up until this point is paradox in various shades of irony, oxymoron, and deadlock. I think a shining example is the thing about your struggle to free yourself from restraints becoming your very shackles in Disenchantment, which I think is a really cool kind of profound idea, that needing to deviate or revolt or liberate is its own sort of constraint on behavior, maybe of the same sort as what you were trying to escape in the first place, at least in artistic situations. To put it in more concrete terms, this is a kind of central thing at play in Meshuggah's music. To use Guy Capuzzo's metaphors, their music is both deviant and normative, always at the same time, in the way it's both rhythmically complex and rhythmically simple. And maybe it's something they were especially dealing with around this time, the time when they were writing Catch 33, which seems like their most self-consciously adventurous period compositionally. It also brings to mind a few related paradoxes. One is the idea that through discipline comes freedom. The concrete example is that constraining yourself by spending hours practicing on your instrument gives you the freedom to do whatever you want with it. The other is the idea that the more constraints you have, the easier it is to be creative. Classic advice about the creative process says that the worst thing for creativity is a blank page or having too many options. Catch 33 had all sorts of constraints. It's all at one tempo, it's in non-stop 4/4 hypermeasures, there were all sorts of technological constraints, there isn't all that much timbral or harmonic variety, etc. I could go on. But despite all that, or maybe because of all that, it's an incredibly creative album. If you have all these fixed things in place, it allows you to pay more attention to doing really cool stuff with the variables that you're allowing yourself to work with. So in this case, basically the riffs and the rhythmic patterns. Some other paradoxes in the lyrics. You've got your shapeless jigsaw puzzle pieces, which I think is a cool paradox, because a jigsaw puzzle is defined by its shape. So calling it shapeless seems to negate its essential essence. You've got your sun of perfect blackness on Autonomy Lost, again, where the kind of defining essence of the sun, its brightness, is negated. You've got asphyxiation by oxygen hands and acceleration a constant in Paradoxical Spiral, physical thoughts in Entrapment, and the idea that mute and blinded is to really see in Mind's Mirrors, which all kind of do the same thing, putting two things together that seem to contradict each other. Catch-22 is a novel by Joseph Heller in which one of the central dilemmas is that the protagonist is a pilot in a dangerous war and wants to get out of flying. The problem is that the only way to get excused from flying missions is to show that you're not mentally fit for them. But the missions are so dangerous that anyone trying to get out of them must be sane, they must be mentally in their right mind. The situation is, like, by the way the rules are constructed, impossible. I'm not sure why Meshuggah used 33 instead of 22. Maybe it's because threes look more like snakes. But the deadlock of Catch-22 is a pervasive theme in the lyrics and in the snakes eating their own tails on the cover, and in the deviant yet normative, static yet constantly changing musical systems. If I had to take a stab at connecting this to life, I'd say that from a zoomed out perspective, it's an exploration of the crisis of self that comes from living in the postmodern world, of this state of having to constantly reconsider everything, of the feeling of being paralyzed by conflicting needs that come from being part of a very complex system. But maybe what the album shows in the end is that this paralyzing tension can be productive, at least insofar as navigating it and articulating it led to Catch-33, the album. In another life, I might have been an English major, so it's ended up being fun for me to dive back into analyzing words, and I hope it's been at least a little fun for you. I am certainly out of my element, and I've pretty much just scratched the surface, saying the most obvious things, I think. I'd love to hear more of your thoughts about what this album means in the comments. I will revisit the lyrics again towards the end of my series on Catch-33 and see if I've learned anything else. But until then, it will be back to rhythmic nuts and bolts next week with the next track on the album, which has one of Meshuggah's most infamous riffs. I will catch 33 you paradox mongers then. See ya.